Hello and welcome to Film Ireland Presents. I'm Gemma Creagh and I'm really excited today to be joined by Vera Drew. The Trans Image Trans Experience Film Festival and the Lighthouse Cinema are presenting a really special Valentine's Day preview of her funny and personal superhero parody film, The People's Joker. Thank you so much for chatting with us. I think this was such a beautiful visual piece of creativity, and I was wondering if you could kind of take me through the process.
The movie kind of really started as it started as like as like an artistic commission, really. It was but really like a joke that I just kind of took too far. Like my friend Brie LaRose Venmoed me $12 to re-edit Todd Phillips' Joker. And I didn't have a job at the time, so I actually just started doing that. It was kind of born out of this, like, because Todd was in the news a lot, complaining about woke culture as some sort of like reason why people can't be funny anymore, which is such a frustrating conversation. Just because, like, to me, like, I'm a trans woman. Like, I have a lot of trans friends and stuff, and we all have no problem being funny still. Um, so I kind of actually started re-editing his movie in kind of like a remix fashion, and putting, various other forms of Batman media together with it, like Joel Schumacher stuff and 60s Batman. And while I was doing that, like, I just sort of had this moment of like clarity where I just really saw how much these characters had meant to me, like, over the course of my life, and how like interwoven into my like identity and DNA they were. And I actually had this like memory resurface of going and seeing Batman Forever with my dad, and it being this moment where, as a kid, like, I was like 6 years old, and I just kind of realized I was queer at the time. There was something about seeing that movie that like really cemented it for me. I mean, I think just because like those Joel Schumacher Batman movies really are just like expensive gay art films of themselves. And it was having that memory resurface that I was kind of like instantly just saw what the People's Joker would be, which would be like this kind of like Batman parody that was also about my relationship to these characters, and like how they've kind of been there almost as like sort of like myths, to help me understand myself and my queerness throughout my life.
And did you like it probably, well, it was before your time originally, but the animated series as well. They're like it's so like evocative, and the characterization was just so beautiful and intense. If you were to say rate it in terms of like, where you got your inspiration from, and we obviously had our lovely Jared Leto um version of the Joker, and then all these different iterations. But like, if you were sort of like to rate it in terms of influences and like the percentage you would get from it, what would you rank it at?
Well, I definitely I'm honored, or I'm flattered that you think I'm not old enough to have grown up with Batman the Animated Series. I definitely was I was definitely watching that a lot as a kid, and I think like aesthetically that is one that like really, there's a whole Bruce Timm style animated fight sequence in the movie that is just 100% calling back to that. But I think the overall aesthetic was definitely like influenced by that a lot. And I think like the Schumacher stuff being like the primary one too. Like, I think like I kind of knew like the movie was going to be spiritually sort of like in that same like neon, like day glow hot topic vibe that is in the Schumacher Batmans and in like 2016 Suicide Squad. Like, I say like those were probably kind of the big three. But there was also like a lot of just like, I think like non-Batman related media that was like super, the kind of like cinematic language that I wanted to bring to it, because I think like it kind of needed to just to like function as a parody. Like it needed to like stand out as like aesthetically something new. And Natural Born Killers was like a huge influence on the movie, just because like I feel like that movie is just such a beautiful like piece of psychedelic art, and how it kind of like feels like you're flipping through channels, but you're also having like a really bad acid trip. And also like the kind of 90s Scorsese vibe of like telling a story that is happening over multi decades, but like told through pop music and kind of flashy editing and stuff. Like I think those were almost even more so than Batman movies, like were kind of a big aesthetic touchstone.
And for something that is a parody, for something that is so fun and silly, it's very deep and feels very personal. I read in interviews you said it's changed in different iterations and like even in form and physical form in terms of what the influences were. But was it sort of cathartic getting that out there? Was that something that you did into as part of the writing process?
Well, I think, I don't really know that I knew how personal the story was until after the movie sort of came out. And like I started like talking to people about it more. Like while we were making it, it really was like this thing that I was using to just sort of process all these different experiences I had as a trans woman, and coming up in comedy and stuff. The reason I was like able to sort of do that was just because I was surrounded by friends, and I just felt safe, I guess, like kind of looking at stuff in this sort of vulnerable way, surrounded by people who cared about me. And my co-writer Bree, like when we were writing it, we really encouraged each other to talk about things that we were afraid to talk about too. Like I think both in terms of like where we were at with like our queerness, but also like what we had to say about television and show business and stuff. I think, when you work in Los Angeles and you come up in writers' rooms and in post production, you're really kind of like taught to not be critical of the things you're working on and your former bosses and all of that. And I think both of us were just like, I won't speak for Bree, but she was very encouraging for me to like write a character based off of Sacha Baron Cohen, and that's kind of what Ra's al Ghul was. It's just like my experience working with Sasha, and also like working with other comedians who like I was even like close and still am close with. Like Tim Heidecker was somebody that was very influential on me when I was like forming my creative voice, and also like for better or worse, kind of became my mentor at times, like really encouraging me to be honest and stuff. And I really wanted to like talk about all of that in almost kind of like a cringy, a very emotionally honest way. And I think the only reason I was able to was just that I was surrounded by friends. And also like, I think you get to a point where like after pitching shows and projects for years and nothing was really going anywhere, and like that's a world where you're like constantly trying to like think of what people like and like pitch something that like checks a lot of boxes and shit. I think what I learned in making the People's Joker is like that's just like not really a way to make art. You kind of just have to tell the story that you can tell, the story you want to tell, make the movie that you want to make, and hopefully like there will be a bunch of other people that want to watch it. And I feel very lucky in that way, because I think there's also a world where like this kind of just could have been something where it ended up being what I really honestly thought it was going to be originally, which was just like a movie I made for myself and a small community of friends.
And a big community of artists. There's such intimate details of relationships and I think the metaphor, like as a viewer, maybe that made you feel protective, but I think one of the for as a viewer, one of the most heartbreaking things for me was the ending, even though it's an upbeat one, because there's a real sort of tragedy in that everything has to be completely rewritten to not be awful. And
Yeah,
I actually was heartbroken by that. Like I actually thought that was
yeah,
like like the only way to make it better is just like just fix it and everything will be fine. And I was like, but there was like a real sort of grimness or darkness to that. I felt that it was, even though it was an upbeat and the Joker is on her like her trip up for power, but like I don't know, there was something like about that. Do you find revisiting those relationships in that way like an act of catharsis? Do you think it's an act of like, are you just kind of like going, this was interesting stuff, or did it just sort of like come out organically?
I think it was organic. I think the only happy ending that really happens in the movie is that like, well, she's finally out of the closet and has like spoken her truth, and she has a vague memory of like a haphazard childhood memory that wasn't horrible. But like, to be honest, that
Yeah.
was where I was at when I started making the movie. Is I was kind of like, well, I've made this decision to like be out and be me and make art that only I can make. And like, like I've had a rough go of it when it comes to like my childhood and stuff, but like there was a lot of love there still. And like, I think I wanted to make an ending that was like realistic but also optimistic in a way. And like, because I think like those two things are all I really needed to like flesh out my future and like keep going. Like I think it's so interesting because like I completely agree with you, and nobody's ever framed it that way where it is like kind of this sad ending. Like the reason we introduced this like mixelplick fairy godparent character is because it's like the movie's just kind of backed into a corner where it's like everything's gotten so bad, the city's on fire. She's like being forced by her employers to like go on TV and lie, and like um really the only way you could end it is with like a fairy tale, and like kind of like hopefully scrap together some pieces and find some hope. But I think there's something there too that's like just very inherently trans is at the same time, where it's I think transition, it's not adding necessarily to what's there, it's kind of a digging and like getting to the core of like who you actually are. And like when you transpose that onto just like where we need to go as a world and as a human race to like ensure the existence of human beings in the future, like it's not going to like it's like we kind of gotta like tear it all down and build it back up. Like the foundation is faulty. So I think the changes that need to be made are as extreme as kind of like taking a dry erase board and sort of reimagining the place we could go. And I think like I think that is what is happening ultimately. Like when I do a bird's eye view, the world doesn't actually look as bleak to me as it did when I started this journey. I think there is a shift happening where people are waking up for better or worse, and we're slowly building a better reality for the future ahead. I really like genuinely feel that, and not in like pseudo anarchist libertarian way even. Like I think there is like a real kind of like humanist shift that's sort of happening right now amidst all the darkness that we see on various social media platforms, news channels.
In the world. I think something like this is so inspiring, and I think what's so beautiful about it is how collaborative it is. Like everyone's like, "Oh, film is a collaborative medium," but it's normally quite hierarchical and embedded in certain systems. And I think
Yeah.
so beautiful about this is the community-led nature of how it came together. And I was just wondering if you can just retell us a little bit about, finding like that community of supporters and artists, and what it was like then building those elements with them.
Yeah, I mean, there were kind of like two things happening at once. Like there was, if on the first hand, there was sort of like cashing in every favor that I ever could cash in of just like the people I had met over the years of like working in television, and it's why like it's how Bob Odenkirk ended up in the movie, and Scott Aukerman and Tim Heidecker and stuff. Like it was kind of like calling up old bosses and people that I had met from like the alternative comedy scene and seeing if they would come aboard. And then the actual like aesthetics and how we were pulling it off, like it was kind of a miracle that it all sort of came together. And I think it was like a product of the time and place in which we were like writing it, because like it was like April and May of 2020. So the world was, COVID was pretty new in the States, and kind of worldwide it had finally spread, and we were all stuck at home, and also like the streets were on fire, and everybody was out of work and protesting. And I regardless of where this movie was at, I needed a big project to kind of work on, and I also needed community because I was stuck at home, and like many of us were, but I lived alone, and it was clear to me that like the world was changing, and I needed friends. So I really kind of just like put together what I could, and I ended up building this website with Justin Gaynor, who's a producer I had met from the Adult Swim on cinema at the cinema world, and we put out this call that was basically like anybody that wants to like come aboard and work on a very trans Joker movie, like write to us. And I really was only expecting like 10 or so people to sort of come out of the woodwork, but like it was so many. It was like hundreds. I woke up that next day just kind of overwhelmed responses. And I think that was maybe the first indication to me that this movie was like going to be important to my life in some way, and that I couldn't really ignore creatively where what was kind of being put in front of me, just because it was like big loud message from the universe. Like I've been watching movies, and especially like independent film. Like I'm obsessed with independent film my whole life, and I'd never heard of like a first time director having like a small army at like her disposal, like to make a movie. So I took it very seriously, like when all that happened. And I think simultaneously that also like there was this feeling of like a sense of like responsibility of like uh working ethically with people. Like I didn't want to micromanage aesthetics. Like I didn't want it to rapidly become, well, I tricked everybody into making my first movie and it's like a vanity project. I knew it had to be very collaborative. So I kind of had to just lean on. I had everybody really lean on what their given aesthetic was, and like we had all these different styles that are at our disposal just because of how many different kinds of artists had responded. Like low poly 3D animation, hand drawn animation, and like puppets, and it just kind of, I would convey my ideas to people and then kind of just see what they came up with, and then we'd find a way to sort of make it work in the edit and composite it all together. And I think kind of having that flexibility there is what really just kind of helped me find the aesthetic. I would have never been able to like picture what the movie ultimately looks like in my head, because it really came together from the team and itself, and in that kind of like that collaborative spirit that all of us had. And it's super valuable because like it's a super personal movie. It's very autobiographical. Um and it was my first movie, so like on paper not to toot my own horn, but I think if somebody else has been doing it, it rapidly would have become this like nightmare example of like auteur filmmaking, and like, no, it has to be like this is what my childhood looked like. I mean, that was just not a luxury that I ever even wanted to have. I really wanted it to have like all these different perspectives and things together. And I really think that was what allowed me to be brave enough to talk about my story in that way too, was just the team that we had kind of built was just so it was just so positive, and it was such a hard process. Like it really was like wrangling that many people together, and while everything was happening in the world, like it was really challenging, and then to like find a unified look and voice to it all. But it was the best period of my life. Like when I look back on it now, I'm just like it was like this real gift that I got to make this, and valuable lesson too for like the future of my career, and how I like want to work with people. Like I really am a firm believer in like you find the artist that is perfect for that given set piece or this specific job, and then you really let them shine. Like that's the way you make a movie, because making a movie is impossible. Nobody should try to do it on their own. Like it doesn't work.
When you shot the live action and you're slowly piecing together, and again, like that's like it's such a unique skill set to you, and probably like a testament to your time working on Adult Swim projects and being inspired by that world as well. But was there like a beat where you were like, oh God, what have I done? Like, because
Yeah,
it's so separate until it's not. Like, and it's so like it's like a million little tiny pieces until it's fitted together perfectly.
absolutely. Like I didn't even watch the movie in full, like completed. Like I think I watched it once before we screened it at the Toronto International Film Festival. So like my first time really sitting down and watching anything close to a completed process project was with like 600 people in Canada at midnight. Like it was that was one of the many moments where I was like, what have I done? Because it really was, especially after like filming it, because filming it, like we filmed it over the course of 5 days. Like all the live action stuff was shot pretty quick. And like that was hard just because like we had really long hours, but compared to what followed, it was like a walk in the park. Like having, I think it's something like there's like 1,600 shots in the movie or something. So like that's 1,600 VFX shots. Like every single shot in the movie is a visual effect. So like that reality did not set in until after we completed filming. And then, I had no sense of how long it was going to take. I didn't, it was always a beast to kind of wrangle as a film. And I even remember like it was like May, it was like April or May of 2022. So about like 6 or 7 months before we're supposed to premiere it. At that point, I had a pretty good sense that it was gonna uh, play it at TIFF and it was gonna premiere that year. And I'd say the movie was just about 50% done. And I was like freaking out because it was just like I finally realized in the process of making this film that I had ADHD, because I had no sense of how long anything takes to complete. I
We do
still I
not.
still kind of don't. No, not at all. Not in our skill set. We're very wonderful, talented people with a lot of skills. One of them is not time management, or just for me, the concept of time itself it doesn't exist. So like I really I was freaking out, and that was honestly another one of the many like kind of gifts that came along the way, because I discovered a meditation practice during that time. I was watching, I was like on YouTube one day, and like I've been like a lifelong David Lynch fan, and I knew that he like did transcendental meditation. Um, but it was like the first time I ever like considered it as something that I could get into, because I was watching this video where he was just talking about getting into it while he was making Eraserhead, and I had this like image of him, you know, because all the sets on that movie, like he was the one building them. He was, whatever the hell that baby was, like a cow fetus or whatever. Like he was building all that shit, and like it was him spinning his wheels at AFI for 4 years, like trying to finish this project, and it was like it finally clicked for me, like, oh, the only reason he has a career is because he stops for like 20 to 40 minutes a day and meditates. So maybe that could work for me. And it did. It completely saved my life. It was like the second I started meditating, I like it was like seeing the world in color. And I'm convinced it's like the only reason I ever finished the movie was because I also just wasn't taking care of myself. Like any sort of like new agey spirituality aside, like I was not I thought the way to finish something was burning yourself out and working nonstop. And I was working 7 days a week and not eating right, and sometimes just wouldn't leave my house for days at a time. And that is not the way you accomplish things. Like you need moments of rest. You need like hobbies. You need things that like aren't the thing you're building and making. And yeah, it really like I said, it was like one of the gifts that I got from this process was like learning how to not burn myself out while making something.
You mentioned TIFF, and that is such a big screening. Was there a beat where you kind of caught yourself just before you go in to share it with that many people? Again, something that was sort of created in isolation in a time when everybody was locked in rooms by themselves, and then all of a sudden, like you're in a room with like hundreds of people. What was that shift like?
Oh, I think it's still a reality that is like settling in just because like since that screening it is played in like hundreds of places and like all over, and I've met so many people that love the movie and care about it. And like even the fact that like I've had like childhood heroes that are like fans of it. Like Bobcat Goldthwait is like a fan of the movie and stuff, and I'm like, that's like nuts to me. Like he's like a massive hero of mine. And Grant Morrison, who's like my favorite writer of all time, and like the People's Joker wouldn't exist without Grant Morrison, as far as I'm concerned. But I'd say as far as TIFF goes, like I had never even been to a film festival before going to TIFF. Like I had no idea. I had like such a vague understanding of what like independent film festivals were like, and like uh you know TIFF is just like the fanciest film festival in the world. Like it's like we were premiering with that year. The Fablemans was premiering there, and The Whale. Like it was just like, what the fuck am I doing here? Like I made this like stoner Joker movie, and it was like on our first press day for the film. I like got into an elevator, and uh Werner Herzog was just standing there, and I was like, it was crazy because like I've met like a lot of celebrities now in my life, but like normally like when you see somebody famous, you have a second where you don't really recognize them. Like I saw Nicole Kidman at the Gotham Awards, and my first uh impulse was like, is that like one of my mom's friends? Like, why do I recognize that lady? And it's like, no, it's Nicole Kidman, you asshole. But there was something about walking into an elevator and seeing Werner Herzog. It was unmistakably Werner Herzog. And I was there with Nathan Foston, who plays Penguin in the movie, and I like looked at him, and he was like, and I knew in that second I was like, I need to say something to Werner Herzog before Nathan does, because whatever Nathan says will be stupid. So I was like, just tried to be very gracious and was like, Mr. Herzog, I'm a huge fan of you. You're like one of my favorite filmmakers of all time, and it's just an honor to like see you here. And he just said very quietly, thanks. Here I am just a rumor. And then he like disappeared. He like walked out of the elevator, and it was like this moment where it was like, okay, the rest of my life is going to be a dream, because it's and that's really the only way I've been able to like articulate it is like it's just it's crazy. It's such a different. I think it's the only reason why, because like I had a very big cynical streak before making this film and releasing it, but it's like the experience I've had around like releasing it, like it's really shown me how thin the layer the veil of reality is so thin. And it's really just been been a dream. I never could have imagined this would be the journey that I'd be on with a movie like this.
And if you could tell me just a little bit about what have you got feedback about what is meant to people personally? I know there was some issues with after TIFF and then getting it out into the world. But now that it's, like now that it's kind of like of the world and people can finally kind of consume it and share it and go see it in a cinema with a group, have you heard back from people what it means? Because again, it's something so personal, it's a journey, but it's so fun and like yeah, the parody elements are so there. It's so beautiful. It's so there's such a vibrant energy to it. As like to see it in an audience, I'd say is a gift.
Yeah, and I think I've been very fortunate that like I've gotten that kind of feedback like from the beginning. Like even at TIFF, the first person, literally the first person I interacted with wasn't even a trans person. It was this like middle-aged cis woman came up to me and she was like, can I give you a hug? And I was like, oh God, sure. And um, like where is this going? But then she was crying and she like whispered to me like, thank you for making this. Like I finally like feel like I have some understanding of like how to talk to my daughter. And it like that was like still it's like a it's a response to the movie that I think about all the time because like while I was making it, I never could have imagined that like the parent of a trans person would watch this movie and get something out of it. Like I had some general sense that like if a trans person saw it, like maybe they'd relate to things, but like, here I was like processing my own relationship with my mom and like what we went through together when I came out and things that for my childhood and stuff. It was like it was very it was a beautiful moment. And then of course like getting to see what it meant has meant to trans people has been incredible. And I wasn't emotionally and kind of just like I don't think I was really built for it like in the beginning, like to have people come out to me and stuff. Like uh I'm about as far away from a therapist as a person can get. Like I mean I'm in therapy, but I'm not. I'd be the worst therapist in the world. I'd be offering you like cigarettes and ketamine when you start telling me your problems. But so I was not prepared for that. But it's been like it's been a real it's been like really like one of the great honors of my life that I've made something that makes people kind of have these kind of awakenings and these moments where they feel like they can be vulnerable in that sense. And there was one other there was I had this interaction. I screened the movie in Little Rock, Arkansas, a few months ago, and there was like a meet and greet after the movie, and there were these two like children that were in line to meet me, and one of them came up to me and he was like this little trans boy and he was like so nervous to meet me and I was like you don't have to be nervous to meet me. Like I'm not that famous. Like you can calm down. And he was like, "Oh, it has nothing to do with your fame. I've just never met a trans adult before." And like it like I'm gonna fucking cry right now. Like it literally like it hit me like a goddamn wrecking ball hearing that like that could be the kind of interaction I would have like after a screening of this movie. And like I don't I never I never thought of myself as a role model ever in my life. It is laughable to me. I'm a recovering drug addict who swears like a sailor. Like I never thought that I could have an interaction like that, but it's like it's such a gift. It's such a beautiful gift from the universe, and like it really it makes like any kind of drama I went through with like Warner Brothers or even just like finishing the movie, it makes it all so worth it. Just those kind of like human interactions and moments that I've had and in such a short amount of time. Like I've only been like I feel like people are still discovering the movie. I mean, like it's just now hitting the UK and Ireland and Scotland and all these other places that like uh it's I feel very rich, even though my bank account is still laughable.
And if you could go back to the you that you were when you were thinking about this film and just like warn yourself, give you advice, what would like, is there anything that you like advise yourself to do differently or take on board before you started? Or would you be like, God, if you knew the work, you wouldn't do it. So I'll just keep quiet.
I mean, I really do think I would just let her do her thing because I just don't see, you know, if you'd asked me this question even like 6 months ago, my answer would probably be so different. But like I really I don't see any of there are so many moments throughout the course of this that felt like huge mistakes. Like I can't stress that enough. And like every single thing happened the way it was supposed to. Like I think the only thing I would maybe say is like get get a few more hours of sleep every night just because like you're really you're not getting enough sleep. And that's just like I mean I think now advice that I want to tell like every create like I just screened the movie at a film school in Florida and like just interacting like I feel like as artists we all like get in our heads that we're like supposed to really like get burnt out. Like even like I was hanging out with some friends like a few nights ago and some filmmaking friends and we were talking about like our next projects and stuff and like one of them said like yeah well you burn yourself out on the first movie so you don't have to on the future ones and it's just like you shouldn't have to do that. You really should not have to do that. Like that's not hopefully that changes as film hopefully becomes more democratized in the future.
And I just want to say thank you so much. It's a really inspirational film. It's beautiful, it's heartfelt, and it's really funny. So everyone should
Oh,
go
thank
see
you.
it in the cinemas. And thank you so much.
Thank you. This was wonderful. Thanks for the opportunity to chat.
So the Trans Image Trans Experience Film Festival is Ireland's first festival of trans and non-binary cinema, and you can pick up tickets for The People's Joker on Lighthouse Cinema's website. And in the meantime, make sure to put the dates the 25th of April to the 27th of April in your calendar, as that is when TITE will be kicking off. We'll see you there.